What's up guys, Coach Dave here with Labz. Today we're going to talk about shoulders, my tricks and tips to build massive shoulders. It's probably a little bit different than what most people would do when they train their shoulders, but we're going to see if this routine will work for you. One of the things I like to start with first, almost every single shoulder workout, is side lateral raises. I feel like the lateral portion of the shoulder gets the least amount of work in any other exercise. So when you're doing chest, you're working a little bit of the anterior delts. When you're working back, you're working a little of the posterior delts. Nothing really hits the medial delts except in the shoulder workout, and it's side lateral raises. The most important thing, we're gonna start nice and light now just to warm up the shoulders, is holding the dumbbells at your sides, bringing your arms up just to about parallel with the ground and back down. Trying to eliminate a little bit of the traps from the movement and just using the medial delts to get the weight up. I'm not coming and swinging my body. You don't want to do any extra movements. You know, a little cheating towards the end of a heavy set, there's nothing wrong with that. But for the most part, you want to keep the form nice and strict and make sure that you're elevating your arms to parallel with the ground. Now, as you go through the movements and the weight gets a little heavier, it's going to be harder and harder to get your arm parallel to the ground. You know, you kind of want to avoid cheating with the movement, but if you have to, it's, you know, a little okay. One of the things that you can do is cut the movement a little short if you can't get your arms completely parallel, but keep the tension on the medial delt the whole time. So one of the mistakes that people make is they're more concerned with where the weight is than where their arm is. And they'll do things like this because they try to get the weight up as high as possible. You want to kind of think about, all you want to do is get this arm up and keep the tension on the shoulder the entire time. So it doesn't really matter where the weight is. Even when the weight starts to get heavy and your arm may drag a little or the weight doesn't get up as high as you want to try to keep your shoulder doing all the work and not cheat by twisting the weight or throwing it up. Keep the tension on the shoulder the entire time. A good mental cue for me with this is lead with the elbows. So as I'm coming up, the weight in my hand is irrelevant. I'm thinking about driving my elbows to the ceiling and contracting the medial head of my delt as tight as possible and keeping the weight under control as I bring it back down. That's why it comes down to my sides and not in front of me. If I bring the weight in front of me, I get a little bit more momentum as I come up. This way I keep the weight under control the entire time and keep the primary mover doing all the work. So obviously, after you train the lateral head of your delt, you're gonna be a little bit pre-exhausted when you're doing shoulder presses. I don't feel like shoulder pressing is a primary mover for building big shoulders, and that's just my opinion. I feel like heavy side lateral raises or heavy upright rows are gonna help bring out that lateral head of your delt and create that rounder shoulder look. I believe the front delt gets a lot of work when you're doing incline bench pressing, dumbbell pressing, even flat bench pressing. So I don't feel the need to hit it as hard when I do shoulders, and I feel like a solid dumbbell press is a perfect exercise for that. So what I like to do is keep the dumbbells basically sitting on my shoulders, thinking about driving them straight up overhead, controlling the weight, and then bringing them back down nice and slow to my shoulders. Nice smooth rhythm. Now there are variations you could do with these movements. I do incorporate some different ones sometimes depending on what I'm trying to hit. But there's the Arnold press starting here, moving up, and then coming back forward. That to me is a good way to finish off the medial delt and bring the front delt into play. Now again, it's just my opinion, but I like starting with the lateral raises first. If you want to really try to move some weight and just put on overall hypertrophy, the same thing as a bench press, a good shoulder press is a good way to go. You're going to build a little triceps, shoulders, upper pec. But if you want to isolate each individual muscle group, I would say side laterals are the way to go first. So another movement that I like for shoulder pressing, it's a little bit challenging, but it's standing Smith press barbell presses. I feel like it does pack some mass on the shoulders. Again, it's more of a compound movement for building overall hypertrophy and strength. It's not an isolation movement like the lateral raise, but it's very good for adding mass to the shoulders. Bring the barbell down below the chin and explode up. Under control the whole time. So another movement for shoulders, and depending on how you do it, we'll focus either anterior or medial, is the front dumbbell raise. So if you look, when most people bring the dumbbell up like this, if you look at my shoulder, you're bringing in medial and anterior portion of your deltoid. And you're bringing the dumbbell straight up to about head height. If you change the hand position and go thumbs up, you're going to focus more attention on the anterior portion of the shoulder and less on the medial. So if you see, when my arm is in this position, the angle of my shoulder versus this position. As the arm comes up, you bring in medial. As the elbow comes down, you focus anterior. So we talked about a little bit of the mass building movements. What I like to start with the anterior portion, side lateral raises. Piggybacked on the side lateral raise, listen, there's machine raises, upright rows. I'm not going to show you all those, because I'm sure you know what they are. But in a good shoulder routine, I like to start with medial portion of the shoulder first. I feel like it's the hardest to work. It gets the least amount of attention in other exercises, and it creates that round cap on the side of your shoulder. The next part of the shoulder workout we do is the posterior portion, the rear delt, and probably the favorite machine for that is reverse pec deck. So finishing off the 3 heads of the shoulder, anterior, medial, now we're going to attack the posterior head, the rear delt. This is a good isolation movement. It's going to target primarily the rear delts. You're probably going to get a little trap involvement as well, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but we want to try to eliminate that as much as possible. It's going to be a little bit shorter range of motion. You're going to keep your chest up and you're going to lean back. You see a lot of people sit like this and they lean in. This is going to involve a lot of back. You can move a lot of weight, but it's not going to focus on the posterior delt the way we want. So we want to sit up, chest up, arms straight out in front of us, relaxed grip, open straight up, keep the elbows nice and high. You don't want them rounding down. You want them up. You want to squeeze and come back to starting position. Squeeze. It's a very short range of motion, but if you're doing it correctly, you're going to fear the rear delt squeezing the whole time. You want to keep the traps down and just squeeze. This is a movement that I feel volume plays an important role. If you start to go too heavy, you're going to recruit other muscles in the back, especially the traps, rhomboids. So you want to keep the weight a little lighter and play the volume game where you start to feel the burn and really isolate that rear delt. So now finishing off shoulder day, we took attack of the medial delt, anterior, posterior. Now I like to finish up with some dumbbell shrugs. It's up for debate whether you want to train traps with back or shoulders. I like to train traps for height with shoulders. So all my shrugging I do on shoulder day. Any type of rows, whether they be low rows, medium rows, high rows, that I do on back day is going to work the middle, the upper trap thickness outwards. Any kind of high shrugging that I do on shoulder day is going to get that trap height up to your ears. So again, we're not going to grab anything too heavy. We're just doing this for demonstration purposes. But we want to lift up, keep the head slightly down so you can get a higher contraction on the traps, squeeze, and drop them.
And then when you do it, are you just going straight up, or are you trying to put some emphasis like towards the back?
I pull them straight up. I mean, I don't pull them like up and forward. I try to keep my arms at my sides and just pull at the natural plane of the trap straight up. Now, if you do really want to get fancy, you can grab a barbell and do some behind the back barbell shrugs, which are going to force your traps into a naturally contracted position to start and then drive them up and squeeze. You might get a little bit more contraction of them that way if you can't really feel them doing them this way. Another cool way to do them, if you can grab a cable with your arms out in front of you and pull them backwards like this, up and back, it just creates a little bit different force angle on the trap. You're not really gonna create much of a difference in how they're gonna grow, but it's a little bit different on the force angle where you're pulling, either in front of you, at your sides, or behind you, all creating that peak upwards from the traps to the ears. So when it comes to picking weight or poundage for shrugging, I like to use something that's pretty heavy, but I can control. I don't want to be jerking the weight up where I'm using momentum to get it up. I want to be able to pull it up and squeeze it up, hold it up, and then slowly drop it down. The heaviest weight I can use to do that is usually what I'll pick. Again, the traps can handle a lot of weight. They're a tough, dense, thick muscle that can handle a lot of weight. So I want to definitely max them out and tax them every time I train, but I want to do that under strict control. So those are just a couple of tricks and tips that I use to implement in my shoulder workout, try to create that capped, round, cannonball shoulder, starting with side laterals, moving into some heavy compound movements for anterior, light, high volume for my posterior, and then back into, again, heavy shrugging for my traps. It's Coach Dave with Labz. I hope these tricks and tips helped you out on your next shoulder workout, and I look forward to doing another video for you guys.